Before I start this video, I want to point something out. That right there is water. The guy in the red is redcoats, which is also known as the British. The guy in the blue, also known as bluecoats, or the Americans. The American Revolution. It started in 1765 and ended in 1783. The American Revolution started because the British just won their 7 Years' War and now they needed money to repair the country. Poor British legislature take away the rights of the people and protect the British men for their crimes. They also increase the taxes income. Everything that the Americans buy, there is tax, even sugar. The British also make an intolerable act, which is the Quartering Act. The Quartering Act allowed the British to stay in any person's house whenever they want, and the person have to serve them as they're needed. Boston Massacre. On March 5, 1770, a squad of British soldiers came to support a senator who was being pressed by a crowd. One of the British soldiers lost his cool and started firing. 3 persons were killed immediately and 2 died later of their wounds. Among the victims was Crispus Attucks, a man of black or Indian descendants. The British officer in charge, Captain Thomas Preston, was arrested for manslaughter, along with 8 of his men. Even after they commit such a huge crime, they were acquitted for the crime sometimes later. On the night of December 16, 1773, Samuel Adams and the Son of Liberty boarded 3 ships in the Boston harbor and threw 342 chests of tea overboard. On the dawn of April 19, 1775, the British were sent into Lexington to confiscate arsenal, with only to meet with angry and untrained militia. One of the sides fired the first shot and then they clashed. During the brief clash, 8 Americans lay dead and some were injured. Only 1 redcoat was wounded. The British continued on to Concord with a mission to confiscate weapons. This time they were stopped at North Bridge and met by a group of patriots. They exchanged fire, killing 2 American and 3 redcoats. The British retreat back to Boston with only this time to meet with more resistance on the way back, and they have to suffer a lot of casualties. These victories boosted the Colonial Army confidence for the war ahead. On that very day marked the start of the Revolution, and the shout was heard around the world. When the first shot fired in the early, the War of Independence has begun. The rebel flag is now unfurled. British strength and weaknesses. Strength. These redcoats, they are greatly outnumbered the Continental Army, and they are also professionally trained. They also hired loyalists, African American, Indian American, and mercenaries from Germany to fight for them during the war. They also are very well supplied, so the soldiers can rest and have great time during their off period. Weaknesses. King George and the Prime Minister were never able to convince the British people that defeating the rebel is vital for the British future. There were also a lot of protests back in British due to the reason above that King George wasn't able to convince the people. Poor leadership. King George's leadership skill is so horrible that is what make a lot of protests and weaken the soldiers' mind. Besides all of that leadership skill, there is also a big Atlantic Ocean in between the Great Britain and America, causing supply trade to be delayed. The Continental Army strength and weaknesses. Strength. These men were so inspired by their leader General Washington that they are willing to give up their life to protect their fatherland. They also received aid from France. The first 2 years of the war, 90% of the gunpowders were imported from France secretly. Weaknesses. These ragtag Continental Army are poorly trained. Some of them only enroll for 6 months or a year. When they start to learn how to fight, they have to go back home and farm. They were also short on a lot of supplies. Even though they have supplies from France, it is not enough for these ragtag men. British and Continental Army strategy. The Continental Army are a militia, and they are small, so they can't fight the outnumbered troops of redcoats, so they use hit and run tactics to avoid getting into big battle with redcoats. While the redcoats, they are professionally trained, and they fight by lining up and taking turns to fire like a chess game. These redcoat tactics has proved to be ineffective because of the ragtag hit-and-run tactics. These hit-and-run tactics mean they hide and they ambush. These ambushes causing a lot of redcoats casualties, and most of these battles the ragtag men win. These ragtags also try to stretch the redcoat supplies to weaken them from the inside. The Battle of Yorktown is the battle that marked the end of the Revolution. The Continental Army and the French surround the British in their fort at Yorktown. The Continental Army now have all the supplies they need. The French at the coast blocking the British exit. General Washington bombarded the British fort for 6 days until the British finally lose their stand and raise their white flag. On October 19, 1781, Cornwallis surrendered, and that was the day that the war officially ended. America is now a free country.